Hello guys, in this video we will learn about the conditional statements in C++. This is very widely used, very commonly used, and it's something that is always good to know. So to understand why we need conditional statements, what are the scenarios where we might use them, what is the syntax and how to use them, what are the different options that we have. I have a particular scenario over here. So let's take a look at the code that is already written, and then from there we will understand why we would need the conditional statements in C++. So in the line number 8, what I'm doing is just having a printout statement which tells that or which asks the user in order to choose from the menu, and in the next line the user will get two options. Either they can add or you can have a subtract option. So a usual scenario wherein if you have implemented some calculator or if you want to provide some functionality which does addition or subtraction, you can print out a menu like this to the user and they can provide an input and choose something from that menu, and then based on that you will have to do something. So in the line number 10 and 11, that's what we are doing. We have created an int variable, and then in the line number 11, as you already are aware about the cin by now, that we are reading the input from the user. Now what's important to understand here is whatever the user is going to input based on what is there in the menu, we don't know it right now. So it's something that is going to happen dynamically. And depending on what the user is going to input, we will have to implement different logics for add and different logics for subtract. So we cannot have a common logic for addition and subtraction. So this is a kind of scenario where we will have to bring in some conditional statements telling if this is the option chosen by the user, do something else. If this is the option chosen by the user, do something. So this is the condition based logic or condition based approach we will have to take. And this is one of the scenarios. And how we are going to do that is in C++, there is something called as an if else a set of statements. So that's what we are going to do now. So what the syntax looks like is that we have to tell if, okay, and a common bracket. So what goes in here is some condition. Okay, we need to write some condition over here. If something do, so whatever is there inside this flower bracket will be executed if this condition is true. And then if not, you can have an else. Tell that do something. So if some condition matches, do whatever is there inside this flower bracket. Otherwise, I mean else, do this. Um, there will be some scenarios wherein a simple else if else is not sufficient, but you will have to check few additional things. So at that time what we can do is we can have an else if also, and then have another condition, and ultimately at the end you can have an else. Okay, not necessary that you need to have an else at the end always if you use an if, or if you use if else if, but most of the time you'll end up using it. But yeah, just good to know. And for else there is no condition that is required. It's only for if and else if that you will have to specify some condition. Else is understood that if none of these conditions satisfy, then you have to execute this particular block. So in our situation right now, what we have to do is that the user has two options in the menu. One is addition, the other one is subtraction. So this is the option that the user is going to choose. So what we have to do is if option is equaling 1, okay, then do addition. Okay, so that's what we will have to do here. So now we are not going to get into the logic of performing some addition or doing some mathematical things here. It's just for you to understand how the conditional statements work in the scope of this video. So we will just write a simple print statement telling we are performing addition, just to know that the conditional statements are working as they are supposed to be working. So I'll just copy this, and otherwise, I mean, we will have an else if condition. So here what we are going to do is tell that if the option is equal to 2, we will be performing subtraction. Okay. And now in the third statement, what we will be telling is if none of these conditions satisfy, So it can so happen that you have provided a menu where you have told the user one means addition, two means subtraction, but that in no way restricts the user from entering something else. User might enter 3 or 10 or 1000. So we don't know what the user is going to enter. So if 1 and 2, then we are clear what we need to do. But if user enters something else, then we need to tell the user that, hey, listen, you have entered something that's not there in the menu. So a kind of a warning or a caution to the user, a heads up to the user. So what we can do is tell that an invalid option has been entered. So this is the kind of scenario where you will have to bring in conditional statements like if, else if, and then else. And so this is the syntax. Just a few things over here. The conditions that you write, for example, you have written option equal to 1. Now let's say we had some kind of a string over here. Okay, so we had some std string, which we can call it as some maybe input. Okay, now had we compared the option, let's say, with input, something like this, and this input had some value or something inside this. So this is a string and this is an integer. Let's see what happens when we execute such a statement. Okay, so you get this kind of an error where it says that you are trying to compare invalid operands. Okay, so you're trying to compare an integer and a string. So this is something that you should know, that whatever conditions you write inside the if block, the data types of both the sides of the comparison should be compatible. You have an integer variable option over here, and what you're comparing that ideally over here is with an integer, so it is compatible. But you can't compare uh, any random two of the data types on inside this if condition over here. That's something that I want you to know, and that's the reason I brought in this example. That's one caution. And the second thing that you should be very careful about when using this kind of an if statements is pay attention to this equal to over here. So what this essentially means is that whatever option the user has entered, if it is equal to 1, then do something. So the equal to, you have a double equal to over here, and sometimes by practice or by mistake we might end up doing something like this. When writing some code, we might tell option equal to 1, because this is by convention for us a single equal to is also an equal to, but from the syntax perspective you have to use double equal to. What happens if you use a single equal to is that it is still going to work. Now let's compile this, and let me execute. Yeah, so it does give you a warning wherein it says that you're doing something more of an assignment over here, but if you execute, it's still going to work. So it's not an error, it's just a warning. And sometimes you may not even get this kind of a warning in some of the scenarios. So you will end up writing this code, compiling, and then if for some reason it doesn't work, and you might spend good amount of time debugging why it's not working. So what happens when you use a single equal to is that it kind of considers it to be an assignment, and it's still valid, because for the way compiler sees it is that you have an option integer variable, and for that you are assigning a value of 1. So something like that. So to avoid such scenarios, to avoid such confusions, what is usually recommended is whatever is a constant, you can place that on the left side of the comparison. So something like this, if 1 equal to the option. So what this does is it prevents you from having such confusions, because whatever is a constant, which is 1 in this particular case, because option is something that is dynamic, it depends on the user's input, but 1 is always 1, it's not going to change. So whatever is a constant, always keep that on the left side, so that by mistake if you use some syntax like this, then immediately you are going to get an error, as you can see here. So you can't do this. You can't, for a constant, you cannot assign some value. So this is one of the best practices to retain the constants on the left side of the comparison. So let's do that here as well. And let's try to follow this as much as possible. Um, so with that being said, now we have understood why we would need a conditional statement, what is the syntax, how it works. So now it's time to execute and see if it really does what it is supposed to do. So let me keep the code as well here so that you can refer. So the compilation is successful, and now we execute it. So it's waiting. So a nice menu has been printed. We have two options, 1, 2. So let's say I input 1, then it says, yeah, okay, we are performing addition. The same thing if I say if 2, then it's performing subtraction. Now, there is a chance that I might enter some invalid option. So it says invalid option. So this is how it works, that you can use some conditional statements, and depending on that condition, you can have some logic here. Not necessarily that you can only have the print statement. You can have any sort of logics over here before that or after that, and it completely works fine. So this is one of the most useful conditional statements that we have in C++, something that you will end up using very much often. And I hope you understood what we were trying to cover in this particular video. So that's all. Let's meet in the next video. Thank you.